So the next couple sections here, as I said before the break, we're going to really try and do a deeper dive into, now that you have your selected candidates, how do you help them to stay on board? How do you harness your orientation opportunity to set the stage for retention? And then how do you use educational opportunities to continue engaging your team and staying with you? So I want to introduce, and the last housekeeping detail is that at the very end, I'll just warn you up front, I am going to be asking you what else VNAA can be doing to support your efforts as we use this session to kick off how we help all of you move forward in your workforce issues. So as you're thinking about, I wish I had, jot it down, because I'm going to ask for your thoughts and suggestions and wish list at the end of the session. So to get us started, I want to introduce Michael Ward. He's the Area Director for Recruitment and Retention Strategies, Clinical Education and Simulation for the Pediatric Practice at Bayada Home Healthcare. Prior to that, he was the National Director for a per diem staffing agency and Vice President CNO of Osteopathic Medical Center in Philadelphia. He holds an MSN and an MBA and is currently pursuing his MSN in nursing education. Michael is, as it says, going to talk to us about his pediatric program. He's also going to be presenting the section from his co-worker Kevin, who is also from Bayada, and unfortunately Kevin had a family emergency and could not join us today. So Michael's going to do double duty and help us understand some of the work that's going on at Bayada. Michael.
I'm going to stand up here for the first half because I'm not real familiar with Kevin's material and I need to refer to his notes. So I apologize. I hate when people read off of their slides, but Kevin's father was put into hospice last week and he couldn't come, and he runs the non-skilled side. We were hoping to present a compare and contrast of non-skilled training versus the skilled training that goes on. I think one of the things that struck me when I went and sat with Kevin for him to go through his presentation was that despite the differences in the complexity of the two programs, his program is a local program where the home health aides come to him. Ours is a national program where we had to look at how do we train people that are in 22 different states to get economies of scale. So the one program, a lot more complex than the other, but at the end of the day, it turned out that the successes and challenges were actually very similar. And as Faith was speaking and I was thinking of what she said about the culture, it kind of made sense that if you're developing your programs based around your company's culture, that the successes would be the same regardless of how complex or different the programs were. And as well as when we look at some of the challenges, some of them are related to the corporate culture as well. So it's kind of interesting reflecting on that when I was thinking about our two programs. So the program that Kevin runs is our home health aide training program. We've provided training in Philadelphia for nearly 40 years at Bayada. The program's designed and delivered specifically to incoming field staff that work in our program, caring for Medicaid non-skilled patients. The program is free to the public, so we do open it up to everyone. People different from the residency program we do on the skilled side, they provide the training to the public and then hire the employee after the training. Where with the residency program, when you'll see, we invest in hiring the person first and then putting them through the program. Their contract with the Philadelphia Corporate of Aging requires 40 hours of training for staff, and this training was designed to meet those contractual obligations. Found out that many people in his program have gone on to become CNAs, LPNs, RNs, and one actually went on to become a doctor. I'm very curious now on kind of completing the loop. I'd like to see one of his home health aides that have gone through his basic training use the Bayada scholarship program, become a nurse, and then actually go through our pediatric nurse residency program. It would be nice to see the whole tie-in and completion of that education. There's no experience needed for his program. It is an entry-level program. Their program runs 40 hours over 5 days. They train as many as 10 aides in a class, and they run 3 classes a month. So they train over 200 aides a year in their program. Many aides see it as a gateway into the industry. Like I said, they go on to become CNAs, LPNs, RNs. I was curious where they get most of their people, and most of them come from the retail or food industry and want to do more meaningful work. There's no cost to the training. Several competitors do offer the same training, but they charge for it. We do not. We also don't require them to sign any contract or commitment that they'll work for Bayada afterwards. So kind of a risk there, but they do screen the candidates ahead of time and get the chance to tell them about Bayada, so they do have a fairly high success rate that over 90% of them do wind up becoming Bayada employees. And their program is taught by a clinical educator. Among some of the topics that they cover confidentiality, consumer control and independent living philosophy, activities of daily living, recognizing changes in consumers, infection control, universal precautions, handling of emergencies, documentation. They ensure that through a number of exams and skill competency demonstrations that the aides are well prepared to take care of the population that they serve. They use labs equipped with hospital beds, mannequins, Hoyer lifts, walkers, canes, etc. And a large portion of their time is dedicated to demonstration where the trainees need to show proper lifting mechanics, transferring, bed bath routine, etc. In addition, they spend a significant amount of time dedicated to theory and book learning. They use videos, books to help them learn what they need to know. In the training, not only are the skills and techniques associated with personal care, such as bathing, dressing, and toileting taught, but they also have to teach them how to act like a professional, how to handle themselves in the home of a patient, how to handle difficult and dysfunctional families. They don't come prepared to the table to deal with these type of things since they're normally entry-level positions. How to properly report abuse and neglect, and many of the behavioral and environmental topics. They've also found that there's a lot of psychosocial challenges that this population is unprepared for. They're not used to finding themselves in the home of a declining consumer, conditions in the home that are deteriorating, family dynamics. So we spend a lot of time instructing them and giving them through situations how to handle themselves in a difficult situation like that. Many of the folks come from non-healthcare worlds, retail, food industry, so they're not familiar with confidentiality and documentation. Also, at least in Philadelphia, many of the people from the same neighborhood take care of people in the same neighborhood. So there's the whole confidentiality issue and teaching them HIPAA and what needs to be held confidential. This is a picture of some of the labs that they use. As you can see, the Bayada way is on the wall there, continuously improve our work through evaluation, education, and training. Like I said, their labs are equipped with mannequins and all the equipment that they need to practice. Their conference rooms hold up to 10 students, so they do put about 200 people a year through. Some of their challenges, a lot of challenge finding high-quality applicants. They hire a very small percentage of the people that actually apply for the program, and even with that, they struggle with retention issues. Despite a long vetting process during the interview and application process, where they're not only checking references and background checks, but are also determining professionalism and reliability, they still have a lot of folks who cannot get to training on time, who have problems being late, problems being absent. During class, they have issues with lateness, disruptive behavior and acting out, cell phone use and sleeping. They've also had challenges with literacy and comprehending the material. He estimates that they dismiss about 10 of the 200 a year during the class for those reasons. Despite the investment and thorough nature of the course, they still do have retention issues with their staff. They estimate that they lose about 40% a year that don't make it for a variety of reasons. So out of the 200 a year that they put through the class, they only retain about 120 a year. 90-day point seems to be a critical juncture for them. If people make it past the 90 days, they usually wind up staying. So they have added a lot of touch points during that process to make sure up until the 90 days that they're keeping in touch with them. It seems no matter how much they explain to people what home care is like, until they're actually in the home, they don't get it. They don't get the challenges. They don't get what it's like to be every day in somebody's home. So they have added some things to the program, such as having a peer that's gone through the program prior come and talk to them peer-to-peer about the realities of working in a home by yourself with someone. Their issues in turnover, I was curious, a lot different than ours, have to do with the lack of reliability, just not getting to work on time, not taking it seriously. They also lose a lot of folks to competitors, since we don't require them to sign on to Bayada prior to the program. A lot of people take the training and then do go to competitors where they might be getting more money. Despite all this, they consider the program a huge success. They've put thousands of people through the program that have stayed. It is a minimal investment because it's just the clinical educator's time. They're not paying the employee for coming, and it's only a 1-week program. So other than the cost of the instructor's time, they still feel that retaining the 60% they do that stay for years, that it's been a huge success. They in turn take these skills and care for low-income senior and disabled population in Philadelphia and provide them a life with comfort, independence, and dignity, and allow them to stay at home. For those that enjoy this work, they do wind up staying and advancing their career and going on further. At the office level, it's also forced the office to up their game in terms of engaging with these people and keeping them and looking at ways to support them during the program. And in the end, there's thousands of employees that they've given an opportunity and have made a difference not only in the employee's life, but in the life of the patients that they take care of. Oops. Any questions about the home health aid program?
Do you have an idea as to the language skills of most of the people that are applying, and how many are immigrants that language and writing in English is difficult?
at least 10 to 20% that even though they're high school graduates and they come into the program, that the comprehension and the literacy that they wind up leaving them go, that they can't complete the program. They have added things to the program, but there's only so much in a week that you can fit in there if they don't have the basic skills. Anything else? Yes.
Can you speak at all to the transition between this class and the actual position? Is it seamless? Like if I finish class Friday, do I get to report to work Monday? Or?
Class ends on a Friday. Monday they come in and go through office orientation. Then they're put out with a preceptor for the remaining of that week. So those that do transition from the program to Bayada, there's another week yet where they're out there with hands-on with another home health aide.
Did you say you hire them before they go into the training?
They hire theirs after the training, so they don't pay for the training for the person to attend. It's a week of free training. The person comes. Afterwards, they're offered employment with Bayada, and about 80 to 90% of them wind up becoming employees, but they, I guess, choose to do that rather than hire them ahead of time and pay them for the course.
Do they do the application process during training and do the criminal and background checks, all that?
Yes.
Before they start on that
Yes,
Monday?
exactly. Anything else? Again, I apologize. This program is new to me, so I am sure Kevin would have added a lot of stories and other things to highlight those examples. So what I do is the skilled side of the business. I oversee the pediatric field education. I oversee the simulation lab, and I basically create new programs to look at where we're not able to hire employees. I don't know about the rest of you, but when we look, we only hire about 20% of the people that come into our funnel. So about 80% of the people get lost for one reason or another. So we spend a lot of time talking about how to expand the funnel, how to bring more people into it, but nobody was looking seriously at the 80% that are falling through at some point during the funnel. So what I do is look at why are these people being turned away, and are there special programs that we can create to retain these people? So one of the things we look at is how do we mentor new graduates? I teach one night at several public health nursing courses at Rutgers, University of Pennsylvania, and it astounds me how little nursing students know about home care. They think it's visit nursing, which is not what we do. We do shift care at Bayada Pediatrics. So we're in the home for 8, 10, 12, 16-hour days, taking care of trach vent children, children on feeding tubes. So usually I'll present the students with a little scenario and say, this child is due to be discharged, has a trach, he's on a vent, what are you thinking? And of course they all say, oh, he needs to go to a skilled nursing facility. You know, the thought that these children can go home and taken care of in home is totally just not something that they get in their education. So we look at how do we mentor these new graduates? How do we take them? How do we develop them? How do we prepare experienced nurses that don't have home care experience? NICU, PICU does not prepare you for home care. There's not a respiratory team to call in the home. There's not another nurse in the hall to call to say, hey, can you come in and look at this child? He doesn't look the same. You know, there's not interns, residents. So even though they might have NICU, PICU, and the clinical skills, they're not prepared for home care. We'll also look at how do we move people along the spectrum that we have in home care. Some people get on a case and they stay there forever, and it might be a basic case that we need to train new people. So how do we look at creating programs to move people along to advance their skills so that we can bring in new learners? And one of the biggest challenges for us is disbursement of the staff. We cover 22 states and 73 different offices. So for 73 educators to be out there teaching the same material just isn't cost effective. So one of the big challenges for us was, how do we look at reaching thousands of nurses that are spread over 22 different states? So a quote from one of our nurses: "I was so grateful for the opportunity to continue to grow with Bayada." Some of the programs that we've come up with is our pediatric nurse residency program, which I'll go into more detail about. It's a year-long program that immerses the nurses in pediatric home care. We also have an introduction to pediatrics course for nurses that are experienced but haven't done pediatrics or home care. Now, in between the two, we just developed a nurse fellowship program, which is a program for nurses that have 6 months experience but not that year yet, to help supplement and support them for that 6 months till they reach the 1 year point. We have courses for people to advance their skill level, such as care of a child or mechanical ventilation. And throughout all this programs, we have baked in our pediatric simulation program, which we use for all of our programs, which I'll talk a little bit about too. So our platform, we've created Real Training Solutions, which stands for Remote Education and Accessible Learning. Basically, it's a list of I don't want to say cheap, but inexpensive options which, when cobbled together, create a Moodle or a Blackboard where you can do virtual education and you can hit people across 22 different states. So some of the things we use Zoom technology for our video conferencing. One of the good things about Zoom is the person you're sending the link to doesn't need to have a Zoom account. So we use Zoom for all of our teaching. Our nurses attend all their classes from the comfort of their home. We call it our Introduction to Home Care from the Comfort of Your Own Home. They use Zoom. They can attend all the classroom portions of the program through Zoom technology. We use a virtual training calendar. We have a calendar built into our portal, so if anybody wants to sign a nurse up, they just have to go on the portal. If it's a nurse that, say, they think is ready to become a preceptor, they can look right on, see when all the virtual classes are scheduled. They can click on and register the nurse, and the nurse then gets an email saying you've been registered for this date and time. They get a little tutorial and video on how to use Zoom technology, and they get all the training materials they need so that they can prepare and then attend the class from home. We use the Bayada Education Connection. All of our materials and all of our checklists are built into the Bayada Education Connection, so as every person that touches that person signs off on all they need to complete the program, it gives them a certificate that they've completed it. We use SurveyMonkey. That's how we survey, get feedback, get input from not just our nurses, but from the offices as well. We use Google Docs. Different people touch the resident through different portions of the program. There's instructors that teach them virtually in the classroom and give them assignments, give them feedback on their assignments. There's simulation instructors that are in the local offices that are touching and dealing with them weekly. And then there's the clinical managers in the office that are following through and making sure that they get the proper clinical assignments. So we use Google Docs as a repository so that each person can look in, and when a clinical manager is assigning them out in the field, they can look back and see what the instructor taught them and had to say about them that week, what the sim lab instructor had to say about them that week. So if it's a respiratory week and they've noticed that they've struggled with identifying wheezing or some other things, they can look for the proper clinical assignments to help supplement and augment what they've learned that week. And we also use a Facebook group page to help them communicate with one another and with prior residents that have been in the class before so that they can interact with one another. So all of those things in tandem we use to try to give them that virtual experience so that they don't have to come into an office and so that there's not 70 different educators out there teaching the same thing. Our residency program is a one-year program. The front half of the part of the program is a 12-week program that they go through. You'll see when you see the calendar, usually they go through 2 days of class, a day in the sim lab, and then 16 hours out in the field with a trained preceptor. Program kind of flows through the different systems. 1 week may be respiratory, then build on that might be respiratory trach, and then cardiac, neuro. They move through, and then at the end we wrap it up with some complex cases like your SMAs where there's a cardiac component, a respiratory component, a neuro component. But the weeks are usually structured that it's 2 days of class, a day in the sim lab going through the emergency scenarios, and 2 days of clinical. After the program's over, the office can waive the year experience and start them working on cases. On the back end for the remainder of the year, they do get quarterly mentoring, evaluation, and support. We're currently undergoing ANCC certification, so I was hoping by the time I came today I'd be able to say the program was accredited, but our site visit is until the end of May. As you can see through by the calendar, they usually flow through. First week is usually introduction to home care. We have a family psychosocial dynamics course that we put them through. We have guest speakers that come. We have an adolescent that comes and talks to them about what it's like being a teenager and having to have a nurse in your business 24/7. We have family members that come and talk to them about, what it's like to have a nurse in your house all the time. What it's like when you call out, the ripple effect of how it affects their whole life and their job and everything else when they're not reliable. And we have different peers that come back and talk to them too. Specifically, we find in the RN program that they've already gone through school, they've already graduated, they already feel like they know it all. So when you're taking them back to giving them review of some of these basics things, it's like, I've already done this, I've already got my license. So we have other graduates come back that trying to talk to them about, I thought the same thing too until I got in the home by myself and had an emergency and there was nobody there to grab to help to kind of help them take a step back and see that they really do need to be prepared for home care. Then the last 3 weeks of the program, they take charge and they're independent, and the preceptor is a fly on the wall there just as a safety net in case they get in over their head or get into any troubles, but they're expected for those 3 weeks to manage the case themselves. Now, I'm hoping there was a video embedded in here. it going to talk?
All right.
Yes.
You should all be seeing
This
my,
is just an example
my
of our Zoom
screen. I'm assuming
technology to show
most
how
of
the
you
instructor
have,
can
let me see
teach
if I can get
across
rid of, there we
22
go.
different states.
Most of you have been exposed to children in the school setting. And you may or may not have looked at this guide to providing care in the school setting, but I just wanted to run through it with you just because providing care in that environment can sometimes take on additional challenges. And as you know, we're always, our goal is always to ensure that we're providing safe care in whatever environment that we're providing care in. And certainly when we're entering into a school setting, it can create some challenges even to simple things like how we're managing medications or treatment, or even some of the equipment that we're needing to deal with. But even bigger issues in the school setting sometimes is understanding our role as a nurse or as a member of the team providing.
And it just shows how it can
All right. Any
transition back and
questions
forth.
or anything that you've encountered in the school environment, Kelly?
Yes.
I just had a quick question because I know if I don't ask it, it's going to happen to me. If I'm on the playground with a teacher, which I know out of the integrated classrooms, they do have pairs available, multiple, if not at least one more person out there with you. But let's say it's me, the teacher, and I don't know, one of the other kids that is not a Bayada patient gets stung maybe, and they go into shock on, the playground. She would be the one to address that child, and would it be okay if I took my child with me to go call for help, like if somebody wasn't within shot? Because I know we're not to participate in the care of other children, but if I'm in an emergency situation where another child's life is in danger, how could I participate safely to help? Because I would feel like crap if I just stood there and watched them work on this child.
Yeah, and I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, you're not going to refuse to, call for help or, do what you can in that situation. And
So that's basically just to show how the Zoom works. You can take it off of the screen share so that you can talk and interact with the students and they can interact with you. And you can also do screen share when you want to do your presentation. But we use this not just for our residency, we use it for all of our classes now because it involves us to get economies of scale and to handle people from 22 different states. One of the other programs that I run, which we use not just for the residency program, but for all of our programs, is our simulation program. We have 40 now mid and high fidelity simulation labs. My goal was for 5 years to have all 73 converted over to simulation labs. So we're at about the 60% point. We have a series of emergency response scenarios that we've created and developed. One of the things that we felt was important was we could control what happened in the classroom. We could control all of that, but once people get out in the field, you really can't control that an emergency is going to happen, that you're going to be able to see how they respond and can they respond appropriately. Nor do we want the children to have an emergency just so that we can see that the nurse can respond appropriately either. So the good thing about the sim lab is that we can make sure, can they apply what they're learning? Can they handle an emergency situation? Even when they handle the emergency situation correctly, the good thing about the simulator is you can go back and you can make the scenario different and say, now pretend you didn't do this. Let's see what would happen, so that you can actually make the child go into distress and be able to see that they're able to handle the emergency adequately. So it's now a required component of all of our special training programs. Recently, we just got a grant from Cure SMA to train parents in the sim lab. So we actually partnered with a student doing his capstone project that actually used the framework theory to look at and see, could he measure any changes in confidence? Could he measure any changes in the parent that they felt more comfortable and responded quicker? So we just put 12 families through a training program in the sim lab in 6 different cities. Mostly parents that their children had SMA and already were trained, but the thing about that is the hospital trains them when they leave the hospital, and then you've got nursing care in your home. So 3 years later, if the trach gets plugged, do you really remember how to jump in there and do it? We competency the nurses yearly, but the parents' training out there is minimal. So part of our next step with simulation is now to look at the parent as part of the care team and not just train the nurses and competency them yearly, but to also competency and train parents as well. Okay, now hopefully batting 1,000 here, this will work too. And this is just a little video on our simulation.
So our simulation lab provides a very realistic environment for families and caregivers and nurses to come into an environment where it feels like a home. So it's designed to look like a home and to have the exact same equipment that the home would have. So then we can have our nurses and families practice different scenarios that might be situations they could incur when they're in the home with a child. The mannequins have realistic heart sounds, lung sounds, and bowel sounds. So we can listen to them, we can assess them, we can determine interventions that we need to do based upon the sounds. When we're trying to create a realistic environment in our simulation lab, sounds plays a very important part in that, because when you hear sounds, you really start to feel like this is a real child. So for example, the baby can cough, baby can cry, or we can have a content baby that's just happy and content. As far as the other technology, we can use things like the bag valve mask. We can use that on the mannequin and we can get realistic results from it. So we can apply that over the nose and the mouth, we can perform breaths, and we can see chest rise. And then of course we can enhance the scenario more by having our vital signs change on our monitor so that it shows the correspondence of the care that's being provided and how we're seeing a change in the vital signs to respond to that. So again, it's just all creating that very realistic environment.
So some of the lessons learned. Different from Kevin's program, we pay people to go through our program. We pay the nurses. We hire them first to put them through this programs. Retention. We do have a retention issue. We do not make people sign a contract despite all that training that they will stay with Bayada. We run at about a 70% retention rate, so we do lose a good 30% of them, mostly to the hospital. CHOP now hires them right out of our program. Try to be optimistic and tell people that's a compliment, but that doesn't get very far with the higher ups. But scalability, we really look at how many people do we need to make the program worthwhile? How do we increase that? So we play constantly with the technology and push the offices to see how far we can go. The current class has 30 in it, which is the most that we've had in there, but it presents its own group of challenges, especially with the Zoom technology. After you get to a certain point, you lose that one-to-one interaction. Burden on the local office staff. The program at the end of the day, we control the classroom part, we control the sim lab, but it is a burden on the offices that, we have CMs that already have huge caseloads, and now they need to take these residents under their wings. They need to find assignments for them. So we do get a lot of pushback at the office on constantly looking to revise the program to lessen the impact on the local offices. Quality Quality, we have had none of our residents that has been involved in an incident report or a sentinel event or any clinical issues. So we're very confident of the quality of the program, that these people are very well trained and very well prepared for a career in home care. Preceptor training. We got a lot of pushback in the beginning about having to train preceptors. Everybody felt the people that they used for normal orientation was great and they knew their people, but there's a special skill with a new learner in how, if nothing's happening in the home, how to stimulate that critical thinking, how to come up with some scenarios and things to enhance the experience. So now we've put over 1,000 people through our virtual preceptor training program. I look at that as a benefit of the residency program, that it's now created other opportunities to advance the skills of the rest of our field staff. Recruitment remains, an issue. You go in, and I speak at Rutgers and Rowan and other places, and, then there's, always a wise guy in the class that raises his hand and says, what's the pay? And then, you tell them the pay, and you can see the whole level of the classroom kind of drop. So like everybody else, recruitment is an issue. We've also had problems with looking for the appropriate technology. We started out with tablets, hoping they could take the tablets into the home and do their documentation right on the tablets, but most of the tablets with the Zoom technology, they die quickly, and the same port that you use to charge the tablet is the port you need to use to get a good internet connection. So we've moved on now to netbooks, which seem to be working very successfully. Our next project is, we're hoping we do the program 2 times a year too. We're hoping with our next class in September to add the Zoom technology so that somebody can do a site visit with them in the home. So that while they're in the home and after they leave the program for the next 3 quarters, that somebody, one of the instructors from the program, can actually Zoom in and can actually assess them in the home in addition to the clinical managers in the office. And that's our program. Any questions? What? Mainly the Northeast, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Delaware, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and then we jump over to Indiana, Minnesota, and starting to fill in between there. Actually, that's been an issue with some of them because of the time difference. So structuring a virtual class and trying to allow for the fact that there's, time difference, and now we have offices in Hawaii. So it's, that's been a special challenge we've been dealing with lately on how I keep volunteering. I could go to just Hawaii and teach it on site personally, but, nobody's been taking me up on that. We started out in the beginning as a bachelor's only program. That actually stimulated me to go back and get my BSN. My bachelor's and master's are in business. I'm a diploma nurse, but I did just get my BSN last month because I found it ironic that I developed a program that I couldn't have even joined if I wanted to, because it was a BSN only program. Since then, we've moved off of that. We had another student of ours that did her capstone project. We took some associate degree nurses and diploma nurses along with the BSN, and she actually did a gap analysis on what the preceptors and educators saw as the gap when they started, and at the end of the 12-week program, how much had we narrowed that gap. And by the end of the 12-week, not in hospital, but at least in home care, it was pretty insignificant, the gap between the two related to at least field assignments in home care. So since then, we've moved on to now anybody with a nursing diploma. And with this last class, we've just added an LPN track. So the LPNs do not leave the program coded, while the RNs are getting their independent hours. The LPNs get a whole additional 4 weeks of classroom, sim lab, more clinical experience. And actually the retention with them is 100%. So I mean, there's just less options open to them than the RNs. So we're seeing a shift from last class to this class, with the offices saying, if I'm going to invest that time and energy, I want something that's going to give me a longer payday. So we are seeing a shift from RN to it being more of an LPN program.
Why are you pursuing ANCC certification, and what will you be certified for?
Good question. We started out with going to the state in Georgia and in North Carolina, which require a year of experience. So we took the program to them to say, well, you know, we have this special program. Can we get time? Can we tell you about this special program that we have? And will you give us a waiver to waive the 1-year experience? They were very impressed with the program, but said, we don't want to be responsible for monitoring it. If you can go back and you can get accredited and an outside agency is monitoring that you're complying with all that, then we'd be happy to give you the waiver. So then we started looking at ANC certification, and we went down there and met with them and found out we were a lot closer than we thought we were in terms of having all the components of the program. Of course, I wasn't expecting that the submission was going to be 800 pages, which has like been killing me trying to get this 800-page document together by May 1st. But we decided then to pursue ANCC certification. It's their transition to independent practice program. So you get certified as a certified transition to independence practice program. We also, at the same time, had an accelerated program for nurses. I mean, ours says a year experience, but it doesn't give you the minimum amount of hours that you need to have. So you could hire somebody that only had 400 hours but had a year experience, yet there were nurses that worked full-time and had 1,000 hours experience but didn't have it over a year, and we couldn't hire them. So we started an accelerated program, and then when we went down to visit the ANCC, found out they have a similar program called fellowship program. So we've rebranded our accelerated program to a fellowship program and are looking to get that accredited as well. But it mainly had to do with just getting around places that required a year experience. I'm not sure at the end of the day it was worth the time and investment, to be honest with you. It was a very cumbersome process, but we're 90% through, so. Any questions? We rarely lose to other agencies. It's to the hospitals, and luckily our owner's philosophy, when I get upset about it, is that's an advocate for Bayada that's now inside CHOP. So so when a parent or somebody is looking to choose an agency, look at all these advocates you now have. Not to mention when CHOP's looking to refer patients, they think highly of how we train our nurses, since they took nurses from your program right into there. So let's just hope he doesn't wake up one day and change his mind about that. But right now,
For those who don't know, CHOP stands for Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. As an old cancer nurse, I kept going, why are you doing chemo? Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
any other questions? Okay, thank you.